So the big question is this: how do pastors like us who remain focused on the mission of Jesus and serving our communities without being distracted by everything in the world around us, how do we increase our effectiveness while living a lifestyle that doesn't compromise our health, our families, or our personal relationships with Jesus? That's the question this podcast is going to answer. I'm Dr. Brandon Party Cooper, and welcome to the Ministry Hackers Podcast. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Ministry Hackers Podcast. I hope you're doing well. Things are going great here on this end. It's morning for me. And so I'm just working through my day. Just had a moment with a client, which was really great. Pastor who is just has grown so much in the last year and has gone through some very challenging situations in his church and his ministry. And yet he is just moving forward, holding on to God, trusting him, and seeing great things happen in his church. They've grown over the course of COVID. And so it's just a joy for me every time I get a chance to sit down and talk with him. So, but as we were talking, and, I realized that this is fall and it's one of my favorite times of year for lots of different reasons. But one of the reasons I like it from a ministry standpoint is because it's planning season. Now, some of you do not love planning season. You do not love the time, that you have to plan things. It's not your most favorite thing to do, but for me, I love it. And I love just kind of thinking about the future and thinking about what's coming and what's possible. And it's probably why I have my doctorate in foresight. But this is planning season. And so we just did an episode recently, me and Pastor Matt, talking about planning your sermon calendar. Well, today I want to talk about planning your overall church calendar and what a few steps you need to take in order to make that happen. Now, one of the reasons that I think it's so important to plan your calendar is because it allows you to understand a broad sense of what the year is going to look like, what you need to do in advance. And it also keeps you from reacting to things constantly or feeling the need to constantly think up what's next. What are we doing next? What's the next event? What's the next, sermon series? What's the next, whatever. It allows you to have a plan in place. It allows you to be more creative for everything that you do. And it also allows you to problem solve any conflicts way before they come up. And so now I realize we're in 2020 and this has been just a crazy year for all of us. And for those of us who do plan, we sat down this time of year last year and we said, what are we going to do for 2020? And we were excited and we had all these great plans, and we got 3 months in and everything went out the door, and we've just been scrambling and figuring out and adjusting ever since. Don't let that cause you to not plan for 2021, because you can sit here right now and you can think through, okay, what do we know right now about 2021? What do we know about, the restrictions that we're currently in and the social distancing requirements and all of those things? What do we know, and how can we plan next year accordingly? Whether it's we plan to be in the same situation that we are in, or we plan for if we're able to return back to closer to what we're normally used to, what would we do? Don't let the chaos of 2020 create chaos for 2021 because you're unwilling to plan because you don't know what's going to come. Because that's always been the case. We've always known that every year that we plan, or anytime we plan, we put things in place. We know that everything could change at the drop of a hat. It's just that in 2020, that actually happened, and we saw what we would do. So I want to encourage you, continue to plan 2021 as you would any other year, just taking into consideration some of the challenges and the difficulties that maybe we will face in 2021 that we're currently carrying over from 2020. So again, I know that there may be a little reluctance to plan, but don't let that keep you from doing it, because it'll give you an idea of what's going to come for you as a church in 2021, and it allow you to plan well and to have good events and good experience and increase engagement and all of those things with the people that come to your church. So with that said, let me just give you a few tips on how to plan for 2021, how to create So I like to do, and this is probably partially why I enjoy it so much. I like to do a planning event. Um, with either your staff or your key volunteers or maybe your board or someone. I like to sit down and have a planning event. Now, not all of us can do this the same way. So from my experience, it's something that I learned way back when I was just coming into ministry. I think I was maybe an intern at the time when I first sat in on my first church planning meeting. Um, I was either a volunteer or I was an intern at the church that I was at. It was a large church, about 3,000, something like that. And I was invited to come into the planning meeting with all of the pastors. Now, for a young, aspiring pastor who looked up to all the pastors that I was under and that I worked with, I this was a huge thing because I had watched at least a year or two before that where the planning meeting was happening, and they would all go up to this one part of the church, and they would all go into this room, and I was on the outside wondering what happened inside that room with all of those pastors. Well, um, my 1 year I was invited. Okay, we want you to come in, we want you to sit, and we want you to observe what the day looks like. And it was so much fun for me just watching the pastors plan out the year, dream, come with ideas, even debate a little bit on what was going to go where and how it was going to look and all of those things. Um, and so I've kind of carried that over to my own experiences as a pastor, and have had multiple planning sessions that are essentially a day long. We come in the morning, and we just kind of hammer it out throughout the day, take one whole day. And by the end of the day, we have the next year planned. And so that's kind of what I'm going to walk you through on the steps that you need to do to have a planning event to where you can get everything done, get some pre work done. You come into a 1 day event where either you, your staff, or you and your volunteers, or you and your board all sit down and plan out the next year. So, the preliminary work, there's a few things you have to do before you have that planning day event. The one of the first things you need to do is you need to sit down with your family, your spouse, and you need to talk about what when are we going to take vacation next year? What are the days that I need off from the church, from ministry, to take a vacation or to be at special events? Maybe you have one of your kids is graduating from college next year and you need to go to graduation, or maybe there's a family event, maybe you're having a family reunion, or whatever the case is. You need to sit down with your family and you need to talk through the next year and what events are coming up, and make sure to get those on the calendar. I encourage all of your staff to do the same thing. All your department leaders, all your pastors need to sit down and they need to think, what are the times that I'm going to take off in the next year? Now, there are lots of perspectives on vacation time and time off in ministry. I will err on the side of pastors need time off. Some will say, you take time off only when you have to. But honestly, I think every pastor should take whatever their vacation time is allotted. They should take every bit of it through the course of the year. And so I want to encourage you, number one, sit down with your family, figure out vacation time, and make sure that you plan those out. Make sure that you at least have tentative dates to take with you into the planning meeting. So that's the first one. Determine your family calendar so you can have those vacation dates. The second thing to do is every department needs to create departmental calendars. So youth and kids and worship and small groups, whatever it is, all of those departments need to have a calendar set of what's going to happen through the course of the year. And so youth and kids is pretty easy because they're very event driven. And so they just need to think about, what are the events that they're going to run and throw for the course of the year. And a lot of times it's based around school. And so after, at the end of school events and the beginning, kick off the school year events, and, there's conventions and conferences and things like that. So you want to make sure that every department has thought through all of those things before they come into the event. Small groups, even. So if you have a small group system where you have, you run on semesters. Maybe you do trimesters through the course of the year. And so, you need to think about, when do those start and when do they end? And is there a break in between? Are you going to do a launch event at the beginning of each trimester? When does that go? And so, just thinking through some of those details so that, again, so when you walk into the planning event that day, you have all of that thought through. So every department needs to have their calendar uh, lined out and at least with a rough sketch, because the idea is when you get into the planning event, it's going to lock in a lot of those dates. And so if a department walks in with no calendar and no plan, and their attitude is, well, we'll just kind of work it in wherever, well, the calendar is going to get filled up, and they're going to get what's left over and probably not be able to get some of their things in the way they need to, or it's going to create undue stress on the congregation, on volunteers, because there isn't a plan and they're trying to shoehorn something in that doesn't fit. And so just thinking through the departmental calendars and making sure those are planned before you walk in to that planning event. The next thing you want to do, if you can, now not all lead pastors can do this, but if you can have your sermon calendar already at least roughly lined out, that way when you walk in, you can be thinking through what series are happening, what things are going on around the sermons and around the series and around whether there's events tied to those. You can think through those as you're doing the planning. Again, now some pastors haven't yet thought through their sermon calendar for 2021, and so maybe that's a piece that you don't have going into this. But I would say for next year, think through when is that going to happen. Maybe do your sermon planning in August or September, so when you walk into October, then you can think through. Then you'll have your sermon calendar ready to go with you into that event planning meeting. Next, you need to check for any special church anniversaries or events that are going on. So what I mean by this is your church coming up on some sort of commemorative birthday? Is your church 100 years old, or is it 50 years old, or you celebrating your 5 years from when you launched, or something like that? Think through those. Make sure that you're not missing those. Think through what are those events, or maybe you're commemorating someone in your church. Maybe someone has served for 50 years in the nursery, or something like that. Just think through any commemorative anniversary type events that you want to make sure not to miss in the next year. And so that way you'll have those on your forefront. They'll be somewhere in one of your planning calendars. So when you walk into that planning day, you'll know kind of what those events are and you'll have them in line. And so think through those, because those can easily slip through the cracks. And then you get into the year and you're like, oh my goodness, we didn't even think about that. So really try and take time here at this time before the year even starts to make sure that those things are put into the calendar. And then the last thing you need to do before you have your planning event is you need to sit down and you need to gather any other calendars that may play into your church events and cycle and the calendar for the next year. And so what I mean by that are, if you have any, so you need to gather your local school calendars to make sure that there's nothing that you're going to be competing against, or maybe there's things in the school calendar that you want to come alongside and be a part of. Community events. So I know here we have a huge run that we do. The whole city gets behind it, and it's just a big deal. So if there's anything like that, or maybe you want to get into the 4th of July parade, or whatever those events are, just make sure that you're gathering your community events, so that way you can think through, if you're wanting to be a part of those, what that would look like. Also gather your holidays, make sure that none of the holidays are being missed, and usually it's not, but it's always good to have make sure you're having an updated holiday list to put in there. Any state or national events that may be coming in the next year. Usually those are holidays, but every once in a while there's an event that's coming up in the next year that you want to make sure you don't want to miss. And then for some of us, we like to do some of the Jewish calendar holidays. We want to include those. So things like Day of Pentecost, those types of things, and Passover. Make sure that if that's something you're wanting to do, to gather those calendars and have them all ready to go. So when you walk into the planning day event, then you have them at your disposal. You're ready to look at them, and you're ready to, to put those on the calendar. Okay, so that's all the pre-work. Once the pre-work is done, it's now time to get into the planning day event. Again, this is a lot of fun for me. Not everybody loves this part, but I think part of it is because sometimes when we do planning events or, just meetings in general, they're really dry and they're really boring, and they just kind of drag on and on and on and on. And I would say if that's the case for you, then you just need to do meetings differently, period. But the planning event should be fun, because it should be about thinking and dreaming and imagining and just talking about what could happen in the next year. That should be a fun exercise for a staff to go through. And so as you're getting ready to go into the meeting, the attitude you walk in with is the attitude that you're probably going to have through the course of the meeting. And so as much as you can, you and encourage your staff to walk into this meeting expectant, walk into the meeting creative, walk into the meeting happy and excited to think through next year. Now that might be easier this year because 2020 has been so challenging that maybe thinking about what's possible in 2021 will be a lot more exciting than what you're currently going through now. And so that's one of my first tips with the planning day is to make it fun. Think of things that you can do through the course of the day that's going to make it fun. Maybe you're going to throw a little game in here and there, maybe a little challenge here and there. Whatever the case is, find ways to make it fun. Maybe you give just a small, cheap gift that that will get everybody through the day. One of the things that I've done in the past is find out what everybody on the who's going to be in the planning meeting, find out what their favorite candy is or their favorite treat, and make sure that when they walk in that day, that treat is sitting on the table ready for them, and it's just theirs. They can share it if they want to, but that treat is theirs and they get that for the course of the day. And so it's just little things like that to make it fun, to make it a little bit more enjoyable. One year got fidget spinners for everybody. So when they walked in, one of the things on the table was a fidget spinner that they could play with throughout the course of the day. Just little tiny things. Doesn't have to be expensive. You don't spend a lot of money. It's just a matter of doing things to make it fun. And when everybody walks in the room and they see, a lot of these little things that are designed to make the day fun, it will shift their mindset so that they can think, oh, we're going to have some fun. We're going to enjoy this. So just think through, how can I make it fun? The next tip I would give for the planning day is to make decisions quickly. You are going to run into times where departments are going to have events on the same day. Now, sometimes they won't conflict. Sometimes you can have both events on the same day. It's not going to be an issue. But a lot of times that's you're stretching your volunteers too much, or you're trying to use the same parts of the facility, or maybe the events just should not be on the same day. They need to be spread out. Allow the conversation to go, allow the debate to go, allow both sides to share their ideas or, advocate for their event. But especially for whoever's leading the event, so whether it's the lead pastor or somebody else, whoever's leading that event and making the final decision, make that decision quickly. Let the conversation go, but don't let it drag on, because if those conversations drag on, number one, they can get too heated and there can be too much tension created in the event and in the room. And number two, it just drags the whole day down, because of every time there's a conflict and then we get into this debate and then emotions get high. It takes the energy out of the room. It makes it very difficult to make it through the day. So listen to both sides, weigh it, and make a decision, move on. Keep the flow of the day going, so that nobody gets drug into that, just that tension and the frustration of planning and figuring out dates. And so record everything. So there are going to be there are going to be ideas that don't get used, but record them, save them, because maybe they'll come up, maybe you can plug them in at an open date later on in the year, or maybe you'll use it the next year. A lot of times, I've seen people come into these meetings and they've got great ideas, but they can't work it into the calendar, and they're like, oh, that's too bad. And that idea goes away. And then next year they're coming up with a whole bunch of brand new ideas. Well, some of those great ideas that weren't used can be then recycled into the next one. And so record those. Also record, final decisions. I've seen that where you come into a planning meeting and you go through and you make all the decisions, and everybody's keeping their own notes and they have their own calendars and they're writing things down. But then after the event, they're like, okay, well, who has the master calendar? Well, nobody has the master calendar. Everybody has their own notes and their own. And so then you're having to decipher all of that and figure it out and almost relive the whole day again, because you're trying to piece it together. So, usually I have one person who's designated as the master calendar. And when there's a final decision made, then it's put on the calendar, it's captured, and then any notes that are necessary are also captured, so that once the day is over, we don't have to relive it. We have everything we need to then execute. And so record everything. Again, bring snacks. That's always helpful. Usually what I do is I have snacks for the morning, snacks for the morning, lunch provided, snacks in the afternoon. So that way there's this constant cycle. It's probably too much food, but it keeps people moving, and it keeps, and try and use fruit and those types of things rather than candy and sugary things that are going to crash everybody at 1:30 or 2 o'clock when they're really needing to focus. So but bring snacks. Again, keep the energy going, and then keep the unity through the course of the meeting. So there's going to be debate. There's going to be times where there's going to be a conflict of what's going to happen when and how it should look. But don't allow that to divide the room or divide your staff, because we're really looking for what's the best experience for our church and our congregation to increase engagement, not advance our own agendas. And so if we can kind of keep that in the forefront of our minds, that every time there is a conflict and there is a level of debate, that it's a debate about the issue at hand. It's not personal. Nobody's emotions are getting too high. Just try and keep unity. So when the calendar is figured out and we walk out of the room at the end of the day, everybody still likes each other and still likes working with one another. So keep unity through the course of the day as the debates are happening. Now, how the actual event will work, and this is how I've done it in the past, is you sit down and you start in January and you just go through. And so some places I've done it, we've done a month at a time. So you just look at January, who has an event on January, and then they shout out the date and you look at it. Other situations I've been in, they go day by day. So January 1, January 2, January 3, oh, I have something. And so then we talk about it. Okay, is there any conflict? No, we throw it on. And then we just move through that. So however you do it, whether you do by month or by day, whatever is efficient for you and effective, I would choose to do that. But really, you just go, day by day or month by month. You plug everything in. You try to plug in the recurring things as much as you can to get ahead of the process. You pull your calendars that you prepared beforehand. So usually we divvy those up between the staff, and when the date is thrown out, so February 21st, well, everybody's looking at the calendars that they are responsible for, and they're saying, oh, the local high school has a play on February 21st, and so, okay, well, is that something we're wanting to get behind, yes or no? And then you plan accordingly. So just thinking through, do you want to do month by month or day by day? But that's really how you go. You just go through the entire year, and plan, plug things into the calendar. That way, at the end of the day, everything is planned, everything is figured out. And now it's just a matter of putting the details and, the quality content and everything behind it. And it'll just make 2021 that much easier, because you're not trying to figure a lot of things out. You're really executing what you already have figured out. And execution, a lot of times, is so much easier than trying to create on the fly and figure it out. And you're going to do things at a much higher level of quality because you've had more time to think about it, which means that higher quality it means higher engagement for everybody that comes, and higher engagement leads to church growth. And so again, if you're not a planning person, I get it. But empower those who on your team and on your staff who are planning people, empower them to really make this event meaningful and helpful, because it could be a huge time saver and stress reliever for everyone involved in 2021, barring any other national events, pandemics, tragedies, whatever. But if everything moves forward as as a normal year should, then having your calendar planned in October for 2021 is going to be a huge advantage for you and your team, and you'll feel it through the course of the year. You'll be glad that you sacrificed that one day to plan out the year, because your year will look that much better and will go much smoother. And so that's just my quick ministry hack for you today. Get your planning calendar for 2021 figured out, and you'll be ready to execute the year as it comes. All right. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next episode.